senior training and development associate. So my background, I feel like I'm coming full circle. My passion is definitely real estate. I enjoy the opportunities that we get to work on in commercial real estate, but I think I'm coming home a little bit and getting back into the education of it all as well. And I think the market is really, I think there's a great opportunity to be open and transparent and pull back the curtain, if you will, on what we do here in commercial. So this, I just want to make sure, and I have Robin here beside me, who is reviewing all the comments and questions as they come in. So I want to welcome everybody who is also online, and thank you very much for joining us this morning as well. If you cannot hear me, or you have a question, please drop it in the chat, and Robin will let me know. So thank you very much to everyone who's online as well. And I think we have quite a few on, or a few on anyways. Yeah. So that's great. So the objective of this morning's presentation, I'll back up and finish the introduction. So I'm 11 years in real estate. When I joined Keller Williams just over, I think 6 years ago now, I started the Reed James Commercial Real Estate team, which has been a really interesting and exciting journey. A lot of learnings along the way, to going from being an individual agent to starting a team and just figuring out what that looks like and how to make that successful. I have Robin here beside me, who is our transaction coordinator, has a legal background, which is really important in what we do, to have that set of eyes on things from a contracts and a language perspective. Joanne and Nigel, who you've met as well. So we really enjoy what we do, and we really focus on all the different pillars of commercial real estate and are building a business model that believes in removing all the ego around commercial real estate, but building deep expertise in the different areas that we do business in. So make us down, go down. Yeah. Okay. So the objectives of the session, there's no chance that we can get into all the nitty-gritty. There's just too much to cover. So my intention when I was starting to put the content together was to give you some idea of what our business looks like, what we do, the different pillars that exist within commercial, to give you a flavor of what this business looks like. So think of it as an overview. We'll talk about the different pillars within commercial real estate. And I've included a couple cases to highlight each of those, a few of those different pillars, and kind of talk about transactions that we've completed over the last couple of years and give you a bit of insight of what those transactions look like and what they involved. I've included some financial considerations for each of the different transactions, because that's important when you're looking to build and grow a business, to understand that piece of it. And to talk to you a little bit about what my journey has looked like up to this point. And the end of the presentation, if this is something that you're thinking about, I want you to know that there's different options available to you to grow your business. Whether you're the lead on the file or not, there's different options for you, depending on where you are in your journey and what's important to you and what objectives you've set for your business. Down? Yes. We'll spend a couple minutes introducing the team. We'll look at common commercial transactions in real estate. We'll go a little bit deeper into each of the different transactions to give you more of a flavor of what that looks like. And then in the end, I'll talk to you a little bit about the education platform that I'm launching, called a commercial GPS, the Reed James Commercial GPS, because that might present a few options for you that you could be interested in. And then in the end, we'll take your questions and any comments that you have. So what's my big why? I read a lot of autobiographies. I'm really fascinated by the journey of entrepreneurs in general. I think it's gritty and hard. And when I see successful entrepreneurs who have lots of money, previous to being an entrepreneur, I thought, wow, what a lucky person. And then you understand that on the, in the lifespan of an entrepreneur, there's very little luck, maybe a little bit, maybe a sprinkling of luck, a lot of hard work, a lot of strategy, and a lot of execution. So, so in the words of Steve Jobs, if you don't love it, you're going to fail. And my previous life gave me a lot of business acumen. It showed me on someone else's dime how they do business, but bringing that back to an area of business that I genuinely feel deep passion for, and that's real estate. I think the two just kind of came together really nicely. So our objective on the Reed James commercial real estate team is to lead commercial transactions in the Durham region and beyond. I personally am looking to create a legacy and inspire all those around me to the greatest of their potential. Teammates, kids, the community, every area of my life that I touch, I'm looking to see how we can make that the best that that can be. And to surround myself, I'm inspired. Talent and business leaders are generally inspired by other talent and business leaders. So I look, and this is why this brokerage is such a great place to be, is there's a lot of people who do this incredibly well. And the more people that you can surround yourself that look like that, the more success that you're likely to see in your business as well. It just is motivating. Our team values, the core beliefs that we build our success in business off of, is that I believe personally very strongly in excellence through dedication. Our team just deals in commercial real estate, and we go deep on that. We challenge each other, we troubleshoot together, and we try to remove as much of the ego as humanly possible. We lead with education and curiosity. There's a lot of questions around the table, and there's a lot of support for each other's transactions, even if you're not a part of it. I think that's really important, and that's a core team characteristic that's really important to me. And then experience through ourselves and our team members. So really leaning on each other. There's no two transactions that are alike in what we do. So the opportunity to learn from somebody else who may have gone through a transaction that's similar or has something to offer what you're dealing with, it can only serve your clients to the best and highest degree. So those are philosophies that are really important to us. And anyone that joins my team has to have that as their core philosophies in their heart. That's what makes a fit for us. And then beyond that, we're diversity is awesome. So how did I get here? My journey started a long time ago. I, in fact, grew up as a young girl watching my dad create really any substantial wealth that they had came through real estate. Even though he was a GM worker. He would talk to neighbors, he knew all the local farmers, he knew all the local councilmen. He worked real estate as a personal passion and would just buy up property as it became available and then dissect it and reshape it to its highest and best use. So passively, I grew up watching it. I think that's where the seed was planted. Well, I know that's where the seed was planted. After high school, I went to Brock University and got myself a chemistry degree, which is so useful these days. You can't even imagine. But it was hard work, and there's no downside of learning how to work hard. From university, I took a couple years and went to Europe, which was awesome. And then I came back and started working at Eli Lilly, which is a pharmaceutical company. I talked a little bit about that already, so I won't go into too much detail. After 15 years at Lilly, I started to feel like a square peg in a round hole, that entrepreneurial spirit. I just couldn't, it was a voice that was not getting quiet, and it just was pulling me in a different direction, even though from my hardworking father's perspective, I had the dream job working for corporate business with a nice cushy company car and all the perks and benefits that came with that. But there was a voice there that I just couldn't deny. And so my husband's a contractor, so we were buying properties and HGTV flipping them. And then, so I started to get my real estate license because having the training and development background, I wanted to invest with knowledge from a perspective of knowledge. So I got my license really just to kind of be in the know, understand more about it, and save a few bucks on commission. Then life happened, and that voice didn't get quieter. And so at some point, I just decided to take the leap and quit my great job and go into real estate full time. It was super scary, so I can really appreciate the beginning of the journey and what that feels like. I started with a boutique brokerage, which was not the best for my business, but like so many others, was driven by where the best splits were, right? That was misguided. I did not last there long because there was almost no support. Then I joined Royal LePage Frank because I knew I wanted to be in commercial. I knew that was my path, but I also knew I just didn't know what I didn't know. And so they had the most commercial agents in the area. I thought, well, I'll go and hang out with like-minded people and just learn from them. And that just didn't happen. This is a really difficult challenge to actually learn how to complete a commercial transaction. So then I was approached by one of the owners of Keller Williams to lead their commercial division, which was like very scary because I had really not great confidence in what I was doing from a commercial perspective yet. But I guess he saw a little something that I didn't see. So on a leap of faith, I came over to Keller Williams, and leadership stood beside me as I really figured it out and found transactions, and was greatly supported by the brokerage, and still am today. A very sizable chunk of our business is generated from the referrals from the brokers and the real estate agents within the brokerage. And more commonly, we get a lot of referrals from lawyers, lenders, agents from other brokerages as well. So we're very fortunate in how we're supported from a referrals standpoint, and we're grateful for the business. I just wanted to give you some perspective of where the business comes from in commercial. So I stole some statistics I have a CoStar membership, which is an important tool in my business, and wanted to give you by volume where the sales come from. So sales by volume, you have 40% coming from industrial sales. You have 18.7% coming from office sales. Multifamily makes up 18.7%, and retail makes up 21.6%. From a leasing perspective, and leasing is a massive part of my business, the leasing volume is made up you got 65.3% coming from industrial, just under 30% coming from office, and retail makes up just under 5%. So that's where the leasing numbers are coming from. The office market stats Canada. So on a sale, the average, and this is just to give you some sense of what the market valuation of different property types are. You've got, and generally in office, you're about, this is GTA East stats. You're just about between 300 and 395 per square foot for an office building. And you've got cap rates, which right now they're a little bit high, and this is like a reflection of what's happened since COVID. But your cap rates generally on office, we look for about a 5%. They're a little inflated right now because office took the hardest hit through COVID. And then you have a bit of sales volume, kind of what the level of transactions has been over the years. For multifamily, we value it primarily multifamily is valued through cap rates. And we're not going to get into a lot of it, what a cap rate is, but it is an important metric of how we value properties. It links the value of a property to the income that it generates. Another way that we look at multifamily properties is per door, value per unit. That's not my number one metric when I'm doing evaluation of a property, but generally speaking, right now in 2023, on average, we're hovering around $350,000 per door. But more accurately, when we look at cap rates, multifamily is like think of it as the small bungalow of residential real estate. There's generally always a buyer for it, and demand is consistently high for multifamily. So you've got cap rates. If you think back to the office, which was 5-6%, you've got cap rates that are lower. So they're coming in around the 3.7%. And for those of you who may or may not understand cap rates, the lower the cap rate is, the better it is for a seller. The higher the cap rate is, the better it is for a buyer. So it costs you less money to buy the cash flow that's coming out of that building, if that makes sense. For retail, you've got, so if you think back to office, you were about $350 per square foot. And then with retail, you're closer to $450 per square foot. So it's a more valuable commodity. But again, with cap rates being my go-to metric, you're around about the 5% mark. That's a bit of an overview for you. And industrial is a hot ticket with incredible demand, but very little supply. Right now, the market stats are showing 300, but there are properties that are even hovering closer to $400 per square foot. It's that much in demand, and it really depends on the building. That's a whole separate course. And then cap rates are also showing 5%, but more commonly right now today, I would say based on the demand, if I was listing an industrial property today, I'd be listing closer to a 4%. What pillars are in commercial real estate? This is very high level. We've got office, we've got sale of business, we've got multifamily, we've got industrial, and we've got retail. There are other pillars outside of that, but those are more specialty commercial pillars, including things like hospitality, recreation, things like that. So we'll get into some of the typical transactions, and I pulled a few from our archives to take you through. In terms of cases. So this was a referral actually from Danielle Stevens in the office. She had a client, her son plays basketball, and she came to me because the group that ran the basketball program were ready to locate their own facility. They were looking for a 50,000 square foot facility. It was a really interesting file. I learned so much on it. It's a real Cinderella story, because we took this shoddy 50,000 square foot warehouse space on Boundary Road. And we ended up successfully securing the space for them. And they have converted it into this state-of-the-art facility. You cannot even believe that it's the same place. So that was awesome. What was interesting is that client, the most important needs that they had were they wanted some office area that would be converted into a concession, change rooms, bathrooms for the kids. They also wanted to run a small school out of there for kids that were very dedicated to the sport. But more importantly, and the deal breaker on most properties that we went to see, was the space between the columns. Because they had to be wide enough. We had to find a building that had 50 feet between the columns so they could get a basketball court in there. That is harder than you think it is to find that. I'm going to let you know, most are like 40 feet or 40, like even 48 feet would have worked, but they're like 40 to 45 feet. It was like searching for a needle in a haystack. But we found, and then you needed the height. That was another key consideration. And then you needed the parking. So it sounded easy when I first took it on until you start getting into it, and it was challenging. So when we found this beaten up warehouse that ticked all the boxes, I was like we need to do this, because it'll be another year or year and a half before I can find you another property that ticks those 3 boxes: ceiling height, parking, and column width. Other than that, you're building. Those are your options, right? Anyways, we found it. Interesting. There were some improvements. If I had to guess, based on the conversion, I'm guessing they spent $2 to $3 million on converting it for their use. Well worth it. If you go there any weekend or any weeknight, that place is pumped full with people. And they lease now, it's such a coveted space that other sports groups like volleyball groups and soccer groups, they will come and rent the facility for them at a premium because there's not many of them around. It was such an interesting deal to do. So here's a really key learning that I learned on this file. I had part of our due diligence is checking zoning to make sure that the use is permitted with the city. And so I did that, and I did that in writing, thank God, with the city of Oshawa, and I had confirmation back in writing that the use was permitted. And I knew that because you can check it online, but it's always useful to confirm it with the source and get it in writing. They spent their money, they got their program up and going. What happened is when they have tournament weekends and whatnot, even though they have an abundance of parking, they're always parking on the street, and people are people parking in neighboring properties and pissing off the neighbors. So bylaw complaints are going in about parking. City comes back and says, your use isn't permitted, and trying to shut them down. But I had the email from the city that showed confirmation that the use was permitted. That was a really, really important email because, I mean, well, for all the obvious reasons. Anyways, I just wanted to mention that. Important landlord considerations. Really what landlords want is they want money. They want the best rates that the market will bear. They want use that's not toxic for their building and the property around it. So they want a good use. And in this case, you know, their building was transformed. So they had a major investment, a major cash infusion into their property, not at their expense. I would say the biggest headache for the landlord right now is probably the annoyed neighbors. The process took about from showing to offer to getting the terms accepted to working them through the lease agreement to occupancy was probably about 9 months in total. The commission was pretty good. And just to give you some sense, the referral check that Danielle Stevens got from this deal was about $22,000. Not bad cash. You can.
For reference, what was the term of that lease?
10 years. I'm a bit of a 10-year. And that's a great question, because the term of the lease is often a point of a major point of consideration for a landlord. Number one, they have to pay commission on the entire term, right? So the longer the term, the more commission that's paid. But when you have a client that's about to invest $2 to $3 million in their build out, you don't want a 5-year term. And here's why. Because after 5 years, even if you have the renewable periods, you're a bit hostage to the landlord. You also want to secure the finances so they know what their expense is going to be for a long period of time. And so the 10-year term here was important. In fact, if I could go back and do it again, not for my own gain, but for theirs, we probably should have negotiated it even longer based on how much money they ended up spending there and what's happening in industrial in terms of industrial rents have gone up by about 16% year over year. Like it's just, and I think 11% a year before that. Like there's been aggressive increases in industrial. So what I can negotiate for them, generally speaking, when I tell my clients is what I can negotiate for you for rent now is probably going to be better than what the market will dictate at the end of your term. So if you can bear it and you're making a substantial investment in this location, we should negotiate for the longest term that you're comfortable with. So a typical office transaction. Back to my pharma days, I used to work sales in the Durham region, and I had 2 very high prescribing doctors practicing out of this building. I had a great relationship with them, but we're talking 15 years ago. So fast forward to last year, and I have a client, an accountant client, who's looking for a building just like this one. And I think to myself, I'm trying to think because there's nothing that I can show them that ticks all the boxes, parking, exposure, the layout. You don't want to spend too much money on transforming the space. I think back to my pharma days and I'm like, man, I think about the age of the doctors and I'm like, they must be getting ready to retire soon. Why don't I call them? So lead generation, I called them up and made a connection. They remembered me, thank God. I got a meeting. Yeah, we are thinking about it. We are winding down, but we're not sure how to do this because we want to, it would be great to cash out the building. The market looks good for it. But we're not quite ready. Like we have to find somebody to take over our practice. One of them, there's 3 physicians who own the building. One is already retired. One is ready to retire. The other one is like 5 years out from retiring. So those are a lot of key considerations. So really we want to find a buyer who will continue on with the medical use and allow them to wind down their practice. So it's a sale with an option to lease back a portion of the space. Anyways, super cool transaction again, because there was a lot of moving parts. And if you are interested in commercial, you have to like deals that have lots of layers and things to figure out. And sometimes it can be challenging. I like making the love connection. I like making things that appear very difficult come together. So we demand property. I listed it high and I knew I was listing it high. I pushed the price on it because there wasn't a lot. We don't get the luxury of a lot of comparables, but my intuition told me that there would be a strong demand for just based on location, the build out, what it had to offer. Like parking is always a premium. So when you're selling a building that has good parking in a great location, that's a win. So I pushed the price definitely to the top and we ended up going into multiples. So that was awesome. We sold the building for just over $2 million. I sold it to a young physician and a pharmacist who opened the pharmacy again that had previously closed down. They took on the physician tenant in the basement. It was a really good transaction. They're still all practicing today in that location. My one did retire. But it was a lot of pieces that ended up coming together in a really great situation. So that worked out really well. This transaction was actually quite fast. I went from lead gen to proposal to listing it to showing it to negotiating in multiple offers to an accepted and then closing. I was probably 4 months in on this transaction. And I double ended it. But
I have one more question.
sure.
You said that you don't have a lot of parents work with teams. So some of it is that some of it is science and some of it is arts. What would you say the vision that would be launched with that price of this solution based on what we find?
It's a great question. So this one, there was generating rent, but the rent was being paid by the owners. So it's not a real reflection, right? That's a tax consideration more than a market consideration. So this one I ended up establishing the value based on a price per square foot. So I had maybe 3. There was one really good comparable that had just sold like within a kilometer of the property. And this one's right across from the Oshawa Center. And so the other comparable that I used primarily was just on the other side of the Oshawa Center. So that was all I had that. And then I broke it down per square foot. But it wasn't perfect because the best comparable that I had was an investment property that an investor bought to lease out the vacant space. Whereas owner occupied is very different than an investor mindset when they're purchasing and looking for property. So I would say to answer your question, this one, you learn the more transactions that you do, it informs you because you're front and foremost. It just informs you as to what buyers and sellers are looking for, what the word on the street is. So this one was probably 60% science and 40% instinct. The final call, I knew pushing the price, this property probably, if it was 100% science, I probably would have listed it closer to 1.5. But I knew because my phone rings and I know what people are asking me for. And so I really just felt very strongly that we could push a price. I didn't actually know that we'd go into multiples, but you know, and I also knew that we had some other things to solve for that were just as important as the price. Keeping them, letting them retire at their own pace and continuing to practice there was an important piece. And thankfully it all came together beautifully. So this was another really interesting transaction. This is a small retail plaza with big demand. I would say industrial and small retail plazas are, if I could list these properties all day long, I would sleep really easy at night. There's just always a buyer. And so this property is on the corner of Trolls and Taunton, for those of you who are local. And these owners I've known since public school. And so again, same story, but I had a buyer who was looking for a property. And I always use my buyers as an opportunity to reach out for listings. I've got somebody who could be interested. It's the greatest opening ever. That buyer, like 9 times out of 10, doesn't work out for the transaction, but you've engaged in a conversation with somebody, right? So they own the plaza. They also owned the house next door. So it's a small assembly. You also, if you know the area, which you probably all do, know between Taunton and the 407 is hot. From Bowmanville to Pickering, it is the biggest ticket in town for development, small development or large development, right? And so when you think about small plaza, why is that relevant? Well, that's relevant because when you have a lot of developers building a lot of homes, you have a lot of business owners who want to be in that area. Think lawyers, dentists, accountants, like they want to cater to new families. So it drives office and retail because you can always lease out that space. North Oshawa, I can always lease out that space because there's so many new families moving to the area, and you have so many, like everything from pizza places to, you just think about it. Anywhere there's new families, there's a business who wants to be there to cater to them. Daycares, like you name it. So small plaza. The biggest challenge would be the zoning here because it's hamlet zoning. It's still hamlet commercial. But in terms of like big, large scale development, you're going to be limited for the time being, right? For the time being. This was a tenanted building. So when you have tenanted buildings, that's always a challenge when you're selling a property because tenants have no skin in the game. And there's anxiety around change. And then this one had some substantial building deficiencies to consider, which a buyer would have to consider, which my sellers were really forthright and wanting to disclose it. And it was a failing septic system. The septic system was too small for all the tenants in there, particularly because we had a restaurant on this side, which will always tax your, like a dine-in restaurant will always tax your septic. So the septic system needed to be replaced. That was a huge consideration. Low supply, high demand. And the first 24 hours that this property was listed, I had over 100 phone calls. And that is not a lie. I spent all day on the phone just talking to people. But the big part in the valuation on this one was not just like, it definitely wasn't driven by the income that the property was generating, although you would think that that would be a key consideration because it's a small commercial plaza. And 9 times out of 10, that's exactly how you would value a small commercial plaza. But the biggest play here is highest and best use because we had the property next door and because it's a high development area. So understanding what is allowed and what would likely be supported by a planning department would be really key when you're listing a property like this. Important buyer considerations would be the development piece and the value of the house and how that changes things. Because the house next door, you're not buying the house next door to operate it as a house and rent that out. You're buying it so that at some point down the road, when it makes sense, you can combine the two properties and either add on to this or just take down the whole thing and build something that's highest and best use. Cost of remediation, because the septic system had to be addressed. So there's a cost consideration there. And because you're buying it for the development potential, you should be building a septic system that could support your vision, not what's actually there. And existing tenants, just navigating them with existing lease agreements. And because, anyways, this happens all the time, but the lease agreements were not good. You should always, like, listen, if you learn nothing else from this course, lease agreements should be done by lawyers, full stop. Like, that's it, full stop. And then financing considerations, because you're buying a property at a use that's not currently for the development. So the use, banks want to lend on stuff that's happening now, not what stuff's happening in the future. So you needed somebody who had cash. The thing went so fast. The biggest challenge came around the due diligence piece. So finding a buyer, like, we were in multiples, we had no problem selling it, but we had to deal with the septic system, and I won't go into details there, but that delayed us a little bit. And then we got lawyers involved, as you should. And some lawyers are great, and some lawyers are just a lot of work. And this one was a lot of work when it got to the lawyers, but we found our way through. Sold $2 million, if I'm not 2.1, I think. The Red Barn. So this is sale of business. This is Nigel's baby, although this wasn't his listing. This was prior to Nigel joining the team. This is, I think, maybe why I hired someone to take on the sale of business. Pillar. This was a $3.15 million sale, so it was great. But it took more than 2 years to get it from beginning to end. Why? Well, it was listed in 2020. These guys were, it was an 8-year-old business that over the course of 8 years, going from nothing, no convenience store existed. It was previously, I think, it was an industrial building for a well installer. And then the owner, very entrepreneurial. These were some of my favorite clients, just such great people. They also own the house. So the property was the Red Barn. Does anyone know the Red Barn? It's pretty famous up in, where? Rice Lake, Roseneath, that's the word I was looking for. You've definitely driven by it. But they went from nothing to $5 million in sales over 8 years, and just they're a staple in the area for sure. Great owners, like savvy business guy, has great relationship with his suppliers and vendors, gets great pricing on things comparable to the grocery stores. These are all the cool details you get when you work with people. And I'm like, I'm a stalker of other people's businesses. I like to learn as much as I can from them. I really enjoy the stories. And anyways, so it's $5 million, strong business, great property. COVID hits. Awesome. So it just really grinded to a halt, because as soon as when you're selling something for the value of their sales and goodwill, and then you take a big hit, and it wasn't even a big hit, but there was just a lot of uncertainty around what happens now, right? And then there's a lot of challenges. We've all been through COVID, so you kind of understand what I mean by that. So it just slowed down, and it was really challenging. And my clients were older, wanting to retire. So COVID was very hard on them, as it was all entrepreneurs. So it just became really important to support them regardless through it, and just it's just one day at a time. In our world, it's one problem at a time, one opportunity at a time, one day at a time. I don't focus on the closing the deal. I don't even think about commission until we are substantially through the transaction, because it's about getting to the next stage. I always say 80% of my job is talking people off the ledge. So, and then when we found our buyer, which we did clearly, lots of activity on this property, lots of calls, because I had an LCBO and a beer store as well, and they own the property. Those 3 things are gold in our line of work. But then, because there was a capital gains lifetime exemption available to my owners, it made a lot of financial sense to do this as a share purchase sale in addition to an asset. So this was both an asset sale and a share purchase. The asset covered the real estate, the chattels, the equipment, the inventory. and the share purchase covered the goodwill business portion. So if you've never done a transaction before in commercial, well, you should be referring it or working with a commercial partner that has. But oh my God, for the love of God, do not even think about a share purchase agreement until you've got many, like until you are feeling very confident in this space. So I just asked a couple questions. How do you determine the value for a business? Does anybody know? Nigel?
Nigel, do you know?
Depends on the business. And I guess like the short version of this is that, this is a course that Nigel will teach. It's based on consistency over time and tangible value of assets. That's the short answer. Share purchase agreement is how you sell the shares in the corporation. So there's sellers want a share purchase agreement, buyers want an asset sale, and that all really boils down to risk. But it's so old. Masood Batandus referred this deal to me. And I think I might have even, I didn't put it in there. I'll have it later on. So this was a referral as well. So we talked about this, keep going. So what options are available to you if you really are interested in pursuing commercial real estate? Or even if you don't want to pursue commercial real estate, there is commercial business within your business that you can tap into. So what does that look like? What are your options? Well, your first option is to say, well, I've got a database of, 1,000 people, 5,000 people, whatever it is. I haven't been asking them about if they want to invest, if they want to buy, if they're a business owner and they need to lease new space. I haven't been asking those questions because I don't know the answers to those questions. Well, you should be asking those questions, even though you don't know the answers to the questions, because you have great referral partners as part of your business that you can then say, hey, that's amazing. I'm so interested to hear about your business. That's great that you're at a point that you're looking to buy a building to operate your business out of. I've got a partner in my business that exclusively deals in commercial real estate, and I know they'll take great care of you. We are zero threat to your residential business. Zero threat. We will not do a residential transaction, but we will take great care of your clients at a high level, and it will make you look like a rock star, bottom line. And you'll get, hopefully, a pretty sweet referral check at the end of it all. Our team policy, we pay your standard 25% referral fee on transactions that have a GCI greater than $5,000. And we put that line in the sand because there's a lot of work that goes into these transactions. And sometimes you're just doing it to serve the people more than to cash a big commission check. And we just couldn't justify a referral on GCI less than $5,000. So you have that option, and that's a great way to start. Even if you're thinking about commercial, start there and say, hey, can you call me on emails or take me on showings? Like, I just like to absorb and get a closer, upfront view of what this looks like. Then we are happy to do that. We will always put the interest of the client first, which means when things start to go quickly and there's a lot of communication and rapid fire, you may not get copied on it all, but you'll get to come along to some showings if you want to. You'll get to stay in touch with your client. You'll see what happens from a distance, and you'll see, that looks super interesting. This is what happens, and this is the truth. People will say, wow, that looks really interesting. I think I'd really enjoy that. And then they take the next step, or they run for the hills and say, I will never do a commercial transaction. Like, they're all yours, right? So one of those two things happens. So that's the perfect way to start. Dig into your database and see how you can make some referral money by just asking the question, what else do you have going on other than the house that we just closed for you? Congratulations, and you will be surprised how much money is available to you by just asking the question. The gateway to commercial transactions, I would say start small. Think commercial leasing, but don't start until you've got some education and you know what you're talking about. So to this point, I'm not aware of great opportunities that are available in the marketplace to actually learn the language and write the deal. In fact, when I finished real estate school, I wasn't very confident writing my first transaction. And thank God I had people that were willing to help me. I think there's an opportunity to change that. So as I mentioned at the beginning, am creating a platform called Reed James Commercial GPS. This is the first one that just kind of gives you an overview of what we do in commercial. But the first paid course is going to launch in the fall. October 4th and 5th is the first phase one of the Reed James Commercial GPS, and it is going to go deep on leasing up to 5,000 square foot. By the end of that course, it'll be curtain pulled back. We will go through an an agreement to lease, clause by clause. We'll look at real case examples. There'll be exercise so you can write clauses and learn what clause and condition to use in what different time. It'll be a 2-day course, and the cost of it is $495 plus HST. So more details, if you've registered for this course today, we'll send you information. We'll follow up with you and give you all the information so you can register if you're interested. If we sell out of that course, we do have a backup date for any overflow of the following week, October to the 11th or 12th, but we'll only trigger that if we sell, because I don't want to go beyond a certain size. I want to make sure that it's hands-on, practical, that people walk away confident to take on potentially a first commercial lease. And then if that really speaks to you, and you think, wow, I really want to I want to transform my business from a residential business into a commercial business, then we're working on creating a pathway to do that. That will include additional dedicated commercial courses, as well as mentorship opportunities, or you can join a team like mine. Those would be great options for you. The financial breakdown, so just a flavor of what this looks like. The referral option to your commercial partners. I'll use the example of the Red Barn. The sale price was $3.15. The referral paid on that was $19,000. I mentioned the basketball facility. That was a $22,000 referral payment. I paid almost $100,000 in referrals last year out of my business, which was best money I've ever spent. Leasing under 5,000 square foot. So I used an example of a 3,500, and leasing commissions are across, there's many different ways to skin that cat. But I just picked a typical transaction, 3,500 square foot retail space at a market rate of $25 per square foot plus TMI. The lease term highlights. So this is for a 5-year term at market rates with a cooperating fee of 4% for year 1, 2% for years 2 to 5. The commission that would be due on that would be $10,500 plus HST, assuming no rent escalations. And then the third one is the sale of a commercial building. I pulled the medical building that we reviewed in the presentation. That was a sale price of $2,050,000, and the commission on that was $51,250. But I actually double ended that one. So it was a good transaction. And that's it. So this is how you can contact us. That's my cell phone number. You have the office number here. That's my personal email. You're welcome to reach out at any time and ask any questions. We'd love to hear from you. My office is over on the west side, on the windows. And we're really just looking to help people with a path into this, if that's what you so choose, or be your commercial referral partner of choice. And we promise to do really well by your clients. And that's it. Do we have any questions from anybody or any comments?
Thank you very much. This was really helpful. For the commercial real estate, is that a place to check what is available, what is listed, or what is sold, other than just the MLS and the altus? Like some places that we don't need to pay a lot of money, we can just check.
Not really, no. MLS, the tools that we use, there's 3 places that I get my information from primarily. MLS, both the residential and the commercial side. I have a paid membership to CoStar, which is about $500 a month, so it's not cheap. And then just from doing the transactions. And there's a lot of off-market activity, which you just know about if you're out there every day doing this for a living. So that's, to Fuji's point, that's kind of where the street sense comes from, just by taking the phone calls, doing the deals, and knowing what's out there and being connected with other commercial realtors. I'm pretty closely connected with all the commercial realtors in the area. We've done deals over many years. So they become a resource for me as well. Anyone from online have a question?
No, they said, thank you so much, Nicole.
I got.
Yeah.
So we know that office space is suffering, it's not due to raise. What are you suggesting to clients right now? What kind of conversations you're what's what is that like you do?
So office space, it depends on the location, actually, like anything, right? Anything north is still doing really well, because there's a low supply of it. And it comes down to the amenities too. Like there's such a variation in terms of the offering, everything from crappy office, like downtown Oshawa, which it's very difficult to lease. That becomes a price discussion, right? It's just the same as when you list a house. You just have to find the price where someone's like, okay, that's cheap enough and they want out of their house and I can do it. And then you just got to ride it out. And there's a lot of patience involved as well. And there's a lot of, generally speaking, I'm fortunate my clients understand, for the most part, they understand that commercial is not residential and that there's a value when you're leasing. It's from a landlord's perspective, that is a long-term relationship. It's not like you're selling a product and they never have to talk to that person again. So with leasing, it becomes very important. Biggest part of my job when I take on a lease listing is not only getting the best price under the best terms possible, but making sure that this is a long-term relationship that's going to be positive for the landlord. Otherwise, that landlord's never calling me again, right? So we do a lot of due diligence up front before we even show the property, to be honest with you. So I think it's just understanding what the product is, where it is, and properly counseling your client so that I'm big. If I had 2 words to define my business, well, aside from no ego, it would be set expectations. Like that. And you can only set expectations properly if you understand what you're talking about. Was that what you were looking for? Yeah.
Where did you get your idea of no ego from?
There's
a conversation you can't trash the broker.
Oh, fair enough.
no, there's just a ton of like, it just didn't, I think that I feel that way about real estate in general. Like, I just really feel it's really important. I have a customer service background, and I know that the greatest success that I've had in my sales career has been when I am solely focused on what's in the best interest of my clients. And I'm not in it for me. And I'm human, the minute I start to think about, oh, wow, if I do this transaction, it'll mean this. I just feel like it comes off the rails, like subconsciously. I'm not sure, it's superstitiously, I'm not sure where that comes from. So I learned really early on, and this predates real estate for me, the better job I do at putting the client's interests ahead of my own, the more success my business sees. So it's not about me and it's not about the team. It's actually about how can we serve our clients and having faith in the fact that if we do that, and our clients, by the way, include our referral partners. If we can do that to the best degree that we can, the success is inevitable. And our clients, so I'm very fortunate. I find, generally speaking, there tends not to be a lot of loyalty in real estate. There can be not a lot of loyalty in real estate. I actually feel very different about my client base because my clients, generally speaking, are business people. And when business people assemble a team, entrepreneurs in particular, assemble a team of people that they have confidence can get things done, the loyalty is through the roof. They won't go anywhere else until you really like mess up, right? And so I really believe it's a very solid business principle for us to not think about ourselves, but to think about them and create clients that would lay on a train track for you, right? And that's it.
I just want to, but it's more of a comment of my own, but it's interesting. Have you read, or know of Daniel Pink at all? I just got introduced with the, those master class things you do online. And he did this, and for me, it was really interesting. It leads into that idea of the no ego, of we want to serve them first. And his whole point is, for the last 1,000 years, marketing has been done the same way. And in the last 10 years, it's changed because clients have more information coming to them. They can go out and, if you want to buy a bed, you used to have to just go to the furniture store. Whereas in the last 10 years, now you can go online and find out. Anyways, I just think that what I'm trying to say through this long thing is I like your no ego approach, and I think it is the right approach.
Yeah.
That's also the approach our team takes for the type of clients we like to take on too, because ego gets in the way of negotiations that are fair for everyone. And that's not only part of Keller Williams sort of values, but it's ours too, hugely. So.
Yeah, I really believe very strongly in our model of like the riches are in the niches, like if you can niche out listen, this is the advice I'd give to anybody who's been in real estate for less than a year, is find your wheelhouse. Don't try to be everything to everybody. There's no success there. It's very difficult to do, and people can sniff it out a mile away. They really can. I think there's so much value and success in understanding and being an authority in your space authentically, versus like where I struggled in my first couple of years because I felt like I felt like an imposter. I felt I had imposter syndrome. I was talking about stuff that I wasn't that comfortable with, and I wasn't coming from a place of knowledge, and it shows up. It just resonates through your pores, right? So then going back to my first couple of years in real estate, the area I did know was buying properties and bringing value to the property and then selling it again. So then you start to kind of feel like, okay, well, that's an area that I actually am very excited about and I understand it. And so then I started really focusing on that, and lo and behold, like that, it attracts people, right? It's such a positive way to lead gen when you're speaking from a place of knowledge and curiosity. Like I also, even in this space, commercial, anybody who tells you they know everything about commercial, they're liars. They're liars, like the team base. Like I am at my best when I am surrounded by people who will push the envelope for me and hold me accountable to what I'm doing and what I'm saying. And if they're operating at a high level, I will by default operate at a high level. So I try to surround myself with as much intelligence and ambition and drive and work ethic as I can, because I know it brings out the best in me, which will only serve my clients, right? So there's some basic philosophy there.
We have a question online that says, any advice for how to deal with someone who has a big ego?
Yeah. You cannot avoid it in commercial real estate or in real estate in general. There's just so much ego out there. Like just throw it away. Just throw it away. Like we're all, at the end of the day, what's the saying? We all get up we all get out of bed the same way, or whatever they say, like
you still have to do the deal, right?
Yeah. So I don't know. My team could probably answer this for me better than I can, but I just generally call it out in my own soft, smirky way. Like I'm not impressed by it. I'll give you the truth to it. I just was like, you can tell me what you want, but at the end of the day, I'm coming from a place of knowledge, and I've done this, and I've said it a million times. This is not my first rodeo. So here's what my client needs. And I almost retaliate. The more ego that comes at me, the nicer I get. I will kill them with kindness every single time to diffuse it, but I'm based in fact and experience, and that will prevail every single time. So you bring your ego, that's fine. You do you. But what I'm going to do is I'm very clear and focused on what the objectives are for my client. I also understand the market and the transaction. So we're going to do this, and you just kind of like, it depends on the situation. Sometimes I'll call it out, or other times I just will ignore it and keep moving forward and kill them with kindness.
He says, I like that and must throw them right off. And I said, as Nicole's transaction coordinator with a neighboring office, I can confirm it does. So I think that the best way to answer that question too, from your team's perspective, I hope that's all right, would be to say, as long as you go into a transaction from a place of no ego yourself, that already seems to throw people with an ego off. And if you maintain that confidence and the no ego as they come in with their huge ego, there's nowhere for it to go. There's nothing, it's not working, right? The big ego is used as a tool to get what they want. And if that doesn't work in the situation, or if you don't let that sort of take over, then it goes nowhere and it gets them nothing.
Exactly. I think that is the way to diffuse it. And just again, the clarity on what the objective is and coming from a place of knowledge. I've done deals where, but you do have to look at it. Here's the other perspective I'll offer. If there's one prevailing reason why transactions fall apart for me that should have otherwise come together, I'm going to boldly let you know it's because their agent on the other side does not know what they're doing. And people get very frustrated. Business owners, entrepreneurs have no patience for that. And they're like, no, and they will cut bait and turn and find something else. And that agent does themselves a huge disservice by trying to do a transaction that they have no business doing. And it just frustrates the whole process. They give bad advice. And what ends up happening most times, if the deal doesn't fall apart, is the agent who does know the transaction ends up taking it over for both sides. I've had agents give me their client's number and say, can you just call them and explain to them what you just explained to me or whatever. It happens all the time. And so when you're dealing with a commercial agent who has an abundance of ego, it may not be ego, it may be frustration to say, like, just move aside and let me do this so we can both get paid. Like, really, that's what it could be. And so I have had it just as many times where they understand, oh, okay, she knows what she's talking about. And then you see a complete transformation. I'll give I shouldn't say the name, but there's a local realtor that I have an incredible relationship with now. And our first transaction was not easy because it was my early days where I really didn't know, but he's watched me grow in this. And now the way he treats me in a transaction was very, very different from how that first transaction, but I was bad. And I look back and I'm like, I feel like I deserved it. I didn't know what I was doing, and he was just, there you go. So on that note,
one last question. Would you recommend ORIA training on commercial, and what other training did you do to start?
I would not recommend a commercial training. No, and I learned by trial and error, which I wouldn't wish on anybody because I made mistakes. I blew up deals. But I didn't have another option. I really didn't. I didn't feel like I had another option. I started with CCIM. CCIM is a commercial institute, but it's similar to ORIA. It's very theoretical and not very practical. So that's why I think there's a huge opportunity in the marketplace to create a platform that is more practical, gives theory, gives you the why, but also gives you the how, right?
That's
And
exactly
so-
why we did this today. That was your whole thing, was I didn't
whole
have much
thing.
to go off of, and I don't want that to be the case for anyone else.
Exactly. And I think it's a win-win. I wouldn't do it if it wasn't good for business as well. It takes me back to my roots. So I'm looking forward to that, although it'll take a bit to build it out. All right, guys, I super appreciate everyone's time. I know how busy you are.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Feel free to take a muffin
Yes.
if you haven't already.